I see. Stone, even at last, provide the key.
For centuries, scholars puzzled over the hieroglyphs they found carved onto ancient Egyptian ruins, tablets, and papyri, but a unique discovery would finally help unlock their meaning. In 1799, as the French military invaded Egypt, an officer encountered a curious stone on the outskirts of Rashid, or Rosetta. It was inscribed with 3 different portions of text: Egyptian hieroglyphs, which is the oldest Egyptian script, dating back some 5,000 years, Demotic Egyptian, which is a later derivative of Egyptian, and Ancient Greek.
Okay, it was Greek. Okay.
It seemed that each section was a rough translation of the others, meaning the stone presented an unprecedented key to unlocking hieroglyphs. English troops soon intercepted the stone and brought it to the British Museum in 1802, where it became one of the most popular displays. Various European scholars, including Johann Åkerblad, Thomas Young, and Jean-François Champollion, worked to decode the Egyptian scripts. There were some crucial initial clues. The Greek section included the names of royal figures, while certain areas in the Demotic section had bracket-like forms and some hieroglyphic sections were encircled. Could these portions encode the same royal names? Åkerblad matched some characters up and, in 1802, successfully decoded the royal names and some simple words like much and temples in the Demotic script. This led Åkerblad to believe that all Demotic signs were alphabetic, meaning each letter represented a discrete sound, much like in English. Thomas Young, in contrast, suspected that some of the Demotic signs were logograms, that is, symbols encoding entire words or phrases. For example, he believed a sun disk with a stroke indicated the sun or sun god. Around 1814, he deciphered some recurring Demotic words, like Pharaoh and Egypt. Young also had the critical insight that Demotic was a later iteration of hieroglyphs, and studying the hieroglyphic text, Young successfully decoded the royal name Ptolemy, but he still believed the prevailing misconception that most hieroglyphs were logograms representing ideas, not sounds. Using his knowledge of other scripts and languages, like the Egyptian Coptic he learned from a Coptic Christian priest, Champollion realized that most encircled hieroglyphs were phonetic. They represented sounds: the Egyptian vulture, and A, the 3 fox skins, Mes, and so on. This finally allowed him to read the Egyptian names Ramses and Tutmosis. Cross-referencing other hieroglyphic texts, Champollion confirmed that many hieroglyphs beyond the encircled names were phonetic. And on September 14, 1822, he ran to his brother's house and declared the breakthrough. Later, Champollion determined that, beyond alphabetic and logographic hieroglyphs, some were classifiers that sorted words into categories, like occupations, plants, and abstract concepts. The first complete translation of the Rosetta Stone was finally published in the early 1850s. So, what did it actually say? The inscription was marked 196 BCE.
God damn.
It honored the first anniversary of 13-year-old Pharaoh Ptolemy V's coronation and outlined a series of benefits for the Egyptian priesthood. The inscriptions described laws for maintaining temples and performing rituals, like the burial of sacred animals. At the time, Egypt was a multicultural society. 2 main languages were spoken: Ancient Greek, brought by Egypt's conquerors, and Demotic Egyptian, the native language. Hieroglyphs represented Middle Egyptian, a language that was already antiquated but may have been included to convey a sense of authority. The decree was copied onto many stones and erected in temples. However, as regimes shifted, edifices were deconstructed and reconstructed. Some scholars think the Rosetta Stone was originally placed in a temple in Sais. It's unclear how it ended up 80 kilometers away, but it may have been transported up the Nile after the late 15th century. Once deciphered, hieroglyphs helped overturn misconceptions. Subterranean chambers within Egyptian pyramids were once thought to be secret sites of priestly initiation and study, but it was finally confirmed that pyramids were tombs housing sacred preservations for the afterlife. Soon, entire texts could be translated that showcase the complexity of ancient Egyptian religious compositions. Experts are still decoding new hieroglyphs as they arise and untangling instances of tricky grammar and wordplay. The Rosetta Stone helped illuminate one of the world's oldest written languages and the vibrant history it emerged from. And yet, the pillaged artifact remains far from its provenance today.
Yeah, that's usually how it is.
Decoding hieroglyphs allowed scholars to finally...
I'm curious about something. I don't know about the discovery, not exactly how they translate it. I don't want something too long. I'm kind of curious about how they found it.
Independence is.
What are the history lessons? We're learning. Shout out GeoGuessr, man.
With a progressive disease, you're dealing.
All right, I want to see one more.
Alexandria, Egypt, 196 BCE. An artisan taps an inscription onto the stele with his chisel, doing a great service for his pharaoh.
My question is, did they find it, or was this like was this discovered like properly? Like, oh my god, like this is in the water. And like, what the hell is it doing here? Or is it just like, it was like behind a building and like, whoa, we discovered it. You know what I mean? There's that broshi.
Oh, you see, his king, Ptolemy V, really needs something to court the priests. For the Ptolemaic dynasty are not Egyptians at all. They're actually Greeks. And for generations, these foreign kings have kept power over Egypt by engaging with the priests of its traditional religion. So this inscription is the Memphis Decree, exempting the priestly class from taxes and from coming to pay homage to him, a gesture the teenage king hopes will steady his throne and prevent another uprising. And the artisan describes the decree in 3 languages: Greek, the language of the Ptolemaic dynasty, Egyptian hieroglyphics for the priests, and Demotic for the common people. But he has no idea that part of this stele, broken and swept away by flood, will one day unlock the language of ancient Egypt.
That's pretty cool.
Big shout out to Factor for helping me decode what's for dinner. July 15th, 1799. Fort Julian, outside Rashid, Egypt. Nearly 2,000 years later, French military engineer Pierre-François Bouchard is repairing the defenses of an Arab fort, strengthening it against the Ottoman fleet that's expected to arrive within days. A year ago, the French army had invaded Egypt and attempted to set up a colony, but that increasingly looked doomed to failure. Both the Ottomans and British are mustering to attack the French, and the army has to consistently battle internal revolts. During the repair work, they find the stone, seemingly used as scrap construction material in an old wall. The engineers immediately bring it to Bouchard's attention, as they're supposed to do with any artifact. Because you see, alongside the military campaign, which you can learn about in our Napoleon in Egypt series here, the French expedition also had an academic component. Over 150 so-called savants. Scientists, writers, linguists, and other academics have come along, setting up a research institute in Cairo where they study everything from local wildlife to ancient artifacts. Seeing the script on the broken stone, Bouchard immediately realizes the implications of this find. If this is the same inscription in 3 different languages, it could be the key to finally deciphering ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. So, he sends out a message saying he's found a curious artifact near Rosetta, the French name for Rashid. He then passed the stone to General Monod, transferring it to his tent to be cleaned and the Greek to be translated, while they dug in hopes of finding its missing pieces. But then, as the French army fought off an Ottoman landing at Abu Qir Bay, Bouchard accompanied the 1,700-pound stone to the savants' headquarters, the Egyptian Institute. And it arrived just in time for Napoleon to see it before he ditched the expedition and sailed back to France. In doing so, he left the savants with a deteriorating military situation, alongside a priceless but extremely heavy artifact that they had no way of getting back to France. Yet the information must be spread, especially once they determined the mysterious 3rd language was not Syriac as originally thought, but the Demotic mentioned in classical sources. At first, they tried copying it by hand, but it proved too intricate. They were stuck until a brainstorm. Instead of copying it, why don't they just smear ink on the front and then press it with paper like it was a printing press? It worked. And while the French army hauled the stone around, even to battlefields, unwilling to...
That's actually so smart.
The prince of the inscription had already reached Paris, which was good because the Rosetta Stone wouldn't. In 1801, Monod, now in charge of the expedition, signed a surrender agreement with the British and the Ottomans. And one of the provisions was that all of the artifacts retrieved during the French expedition to Egypt were now spoils of war and the personal property of King George III, especially the Rosetta Stone. In fact, the British were so pleased with its acquisition that they actually painted on the side, "Captured in Egypt by the British Army in 1801. A year later, when King George donated it to the British Museum, he added on the other side, "Presented by King George III. Now, I bet you think you know how this goes from here. They matched the Greek with the hieroglyphics and boom, ancient Egyptian deciphered, right? Well, turns out, not actually. Even matching the hieroglyphic characters with the Greek, no one could make heads or tails out of them. But that also wasn't really their fault. See, the Europeans were missing a key piece of the puzzle, and had been for 2,000 years. Europeans had been trying to figure out how to read hieroglyphics for centuries, but the only instructions on how to do so came from ancient Greek and Roman writers who insisted that they were ideographic, using pictures to indicate concepts. And while that was true sometimes, they could also be phonetic, indicating sounds the same way.
All right, hold on one second. Let me go get my monitor. This is so fascinating. Wow.